this house is now resumed its sitting. The bill entitled Virgin Islands Gaming and Betting Control Act 2020 has made its way through committee, where honorable members went through the bill clause by clause. I therefore call on the mover of the motion and sponsor of the bill, the Premier and Minister of Finance, the Honorable Andrew A. Foy, to report.
Move. I beg to report that the bill that was entitled Gambling, Gaming and Betting Control Act 2020, that has been amended now to read Virgin Islands Gaming and Betting Control Act 2020, has passed through committee with amendments. Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill entitled now Virgin Islands Gaming and Betting Control Act 2020 be read a third time and passed as amended.
Mr. Speaker, I stand to second that motion proudly. Thank you.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled Virgin Islands Gaming and Betting Control Act 2020 be now read a third time. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill for a third time.
This act may be cited as the Virgin Islands Gaming and Betting Control Act 2020.
The bill has been read a third time and passed with amendments. I call upon the Premier and Leader of Government Business.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, again, we move to another bill that has been long and coming, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I move the motion and I move the second and third reading of the bill, entitled Liquor License Act 2019. Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill shortly entitled Liquor License Act 2019 be read a second time. Mr. Speaker, I want to state for you very briefly with this bill. We know that we have the liquor license, Mr. Speaker, and how persons register for it is they go to the magistrate court, and Mr. Speaker, you know the cumbersomeness of burdening the courts with this matter for years has been something that has been spoken about for many, many, many years. Mr. Speaker, I can remember the cause being championed by the member of the third, and why are we burdening the courts with this? And Mr. Speaker, the truth of the matter is that he was correct. And in order to remove this, Mr. Speaker, from the magistrate court doing all of the work of the licensing, etc., is now removing it from the magistrate court because they were the one issuing the licenses, and now we're going to get it back to a board to get it back to the executive to be able to be the one that grant the licenses. Mr. Speaker, this is a very revolutionary process and act that is being done by the government of the Virgin Islands. So there's going to be a liquor licensing board, Mr. Speaker. And this, Mr. Speaker, goes to ensure that the business of the people is put in such a process that it speeds up the licensing and the whole processing of the liquor licensing, and also in terms of the payment and the renewal and everything that needs to be done to help business people, Mr. Speaker, to move a lot faster, more efficient, Mr. Speaker, and even more accessible to business persons, Mr. Speaker. So there is the crux of the change that has been done within this, Mr. Speaker, through the establishment of the Liquor Licensing Board. Mr. Speaker, this has been spoken about for many years. As I said, for many legislations that we have passed and things that this government has done, we intend to tackle the tough areas and make the tough decisions in the best interest of the people of the Virgin Islands. So now persons who want to get their liquor license will be able to go through the Liquor Licensing Board. Those who want to renew, and Mr. Speaker, it will be much more business friendly, this new venture that the government is doing in the process. So, Mr. Speaker, that the magistrate court can get on with other business of the people and be able to do even more and even faster than they already are doing, because they're doing so well with what they do have. So this will allow some of the burden to come off of the magistrate court with a good size of their burden and be placed rightfully into the licensing board. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my colleagues for helping us to get this far with this new Liquor License Act, the Virgin Islands Liquor License Act 2019. We're trying to get it passed from last year. I know that after the debate, we will be able to go in the committee stage and make some amendments so that I know for sure when it comes out, it would most likely be reading Virgin Islands Liquor License Act 2020. But this is how long we have been battling to get this change, Mr. Speaker, that the bill is saying 2019. But if you notice, Mr. Speaker, that from January, the end of December, I have informed my government members, my colleagues, who I appreciated them so much, I would not trade them in for no one else, because there's so much you can get done when you have oneness of mind, oneness in purpose, and unity. That's not to say that we don't have our disagreements, but we remain oneness in purpose, we remain unified. And I've said that the start of this year, that we have to move with haste, extreme haste, to get the business of the people of the Virgin Islands done and modernize it in such a way that is even more efficient. And this is one of those ways, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, with that short introduction, I, Mr. Speaker, with all pleasure, I'm glad to move this bill to Virgin Islands Liquor License Act 2019 to now, after being seconded, move towards the debate and towards the committee stage where we can go through it clause by clause, line by line, clause by clause, page by page, to make sure that we get as close to a perfect bill for the people of the Virgin Islands so that we can enhance the business person's experience with getting a liquor license and also renewing of the liquor license, along with all other areas that come with this process that will be put into place by the government of the Virgin Islands through the establishment of the Liquor Licensing Board. Mr. Speaker, with that, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to second the motion, and I will reserve my comments at a later stage.
Honorable members, the bill has been moved and seconded. The floor is now open for debate. I recognize the representative for the 3rd District and senior member of the House, the Honorable Julian Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to recognize the courage of the Premier to finally have this bill surface before the legislature for passage. It's no secret, Mr. Speaker, the issue of liquor licensing in the territory has been a bone of contention for several reasons. And I can understand why it was with the magistrate. Most politicians would prefer for it to be with the magistrate because it requires a lot of courage to have to deal with the issues relating or surrounding liquor licenses. And it's not an area that politicians would want to get into. So the magistrate was ideal, in a sense, to deal with those issues. But at the same time, Mr. Speaker, as the Premier rightly stated, the issues of the court are so pressing. We know our resources at the courts are limited. And to be basically distracted or sidetracked by something like issuing licenses for liquor that can be done elsewhere may not have been a wise thing to do. So at the same time, pulling it away from the magistrate's jurisdiction and placing it with the deputy governor also required a lot of courage. And I think the Premier gives adequate explanation for his reasoning behind doing it. Mr. Speaker, I was thinking about the licensing of people to sell liquor, what it means. How necessary is it in the 21st century for someone to obtain a license to sell liquor? And when I was thinking about it, Mr. Speaker, I was thinking about the small mom and pop store kind of selling liquor, a shot of whiskey, beer. And I was wondering to myself, is it really necessary? Because the people who had the most to complain about when it came to obtaining a liquor license seemingly were those kind of people. A small, very small establishment, you have to really go in it or hang around it for a while to see what it is they were doing. It wasn't some big establishment that you're talking about where hundreds of shots of whiskey is sold on a daily basis and several kegs of beer being dispensed off on a daily basis. We're talking about these small little mom and pops type operation. And the headache that they had to go through. I mean, you have to bring with you your block and parcel number, your lease, good standing certificate, maybe, and all kind of things for this lady or this man to sell a little shot of whiskey. And throughout the course of the year, maybe he grossed $500 in his little business. Of the $500 that he grossed, Mr. Speaker, $300 went towards the purchase of the liquor itself. So he net $200. But he had to go through the same gyration as the nightclub. Those clubs that they were talking about a little earlier, the bars that we talked about a little earlier. Who does in fact they do need some scrutiny. So I hope that in this bill, Mr. Speaker, we have some exemption based on the volume of sales. Because I have a concern about these people who just probably sell a stout. And over the course of a day, they probably don't sell only five stout, 2 beers, and that's the extent of their business for the day as far as liquor is concerned. The major part of their business might be selling food, but they just want to have something for the few customers that wants to have alcoholic beverage. So those are kind of accommodations I would like to see made in the bill, Mr. Speaker. But the onerous steps that people have to take in order to get a license needs to be curtailed. I see we have a liquor licensing board. I know, Mr. Speaker, that we're in the 21st century, and when you're looking at laws in the Virgin Islands, you have to look at them in the light of what obtains for the day. What is taking place in the rest of the world as far as liquor licensing is concerned. And those are the kind of things we model our legislation from. It's not just, we don't make legislation just for today, because we have laws on the books, Mr. Speaker, that dates back in the 60s. And they have to be applicable for our operations today. So this piece of legislation that's going to be in 2020 probably will never get amended till 2050. So it has to have all the bells and trappings on it. That's why this liquor licensing board is necessary, I guess, at this stage. But I just hope it's not making it more difficult for some people, to be able to obtain a liquor license, which, as I stated, is not the bulk of their business. They can usually they will prefer not have it, but in not having it, in not being able to sell liquor, they might lose customers in other areas. And those are the kind of things that we must be mindful of when we are making laws like this. It's not about the money that government is going to make as far as the license itself is concerned. It's also about making it convenient for our entrepreneurs in whatever shape or form they're in to be able to operate their business. So, Mr. Speaker, in that regard, I think that we've been able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone by moving the liquor licensing from the area in which it was, bringing it into, so to speak, a civilian hand, make it easier for complaints to be dealt with. I'm sure that where it's going now, when people have complaints, it can be more readily dealt with. And also, at the same time, Mr. Speaker, it seems to me as if the licensing procedure, having to go through a board, become more uniform. It becomes, well, the makeup of the board gives the board a better understanding of the people that they're dealing with. because I'm sure it will be people from the community who understands what is taking place in the community, what people need are. These little people that I'm talking about, Mr. Speaker, are people who literally ended up hiring a consultant to deal with their licensing. They did. It was like filing your taxes. Something that is foreign to you, is alien to you. So you hired a consultant to prepare taxes for you. And these people were actually engaging someone as their consultant in order for them to obtain a liquor license. It shouldn't be that difficult. It shouldn't be that way. And I'm sure that now with this new system in place, you got a new administering agency, you have a new procedure for granting the license, makes it more friendly to the customers or constituents, the businesses, to have the license that they need. And Mr. Speaker, I don't want for just anyone to believe that they can just now go out and obtain a liquor license. I hope, Mr. Speaker, that this is not the message that is coming through with the bill now, with this agency now moving from the magistrate to the Deputy Governor's office. Because you might have felt that the magistrate knows about your history, and you might be afraid to go to the magistrate to get a license, but now I could run to the Deputy Governor to get a license. No, you'll be going through the same scrutiny to check to see what your records are, and your due diligence will be carried out on you just the same way. It just means that the process will be a little more, a little faster. And don't come running to your politician, your representative, to go get a license for you. No, that's not what this is all about, Mr. Speaker. So I think that it's a good step in the right direction. I wouldn't have wished it on a minister. And I noticed that that's not where it is. I see the word minister appears many times in the legislation, which I don't know how they're going to deal with that. Just for the money. Okay. So I think, Mr. Speaker, that it's easy for me to say, well, it's something that I can support. I take my seat.
I thank the senior member for his contribution. Floor is still open as we debate the Virgin Islands Liquor License Act 2019. I recognize the Minister for Natural Resources, Labor and Immigration, and member for the 9th District, the Honorable Vincent O. Whitley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to say a few words on this very important bill, the Liquor License Bill. The Liquor License Bill, like was said earlier, has been around for a very long time, and there's been a call for a very long time to have the whole procedure modernized. So I'm very pleased, Mr. Speaker, that it's happening at a time like now when I'm in the House. In my former career, I had a lot to do with liquor license granting. And I could tell you it was a headache for a lot of persons, particularly on the sister islands, to have to go through the procedure that then existed. Because, you see, Mr. Speaker, you had to coordinate at that time with at least 3 different departments: police, fire, and health. And getting those 3 persons to go to I don't mean like Virgin or Anegada, but the other islands that do a lot of business, like Cook Island and Peter Island and Norman Island. Islands that don't really have regular ferry services. So most of the time what we had to do was to charter boats to take fire, police, and health, environmental health, at the same time. This now simplifies that process because it's a board that's more easily accessible. And even in those days, once the 3 departments went out, they then prepared their 3 reports at different times. This bill here synchronizes everything like a one-stop shop now. It really, really simplifies. What I didn't see, was I hope to maybe get addressed in committee stage, is we used to do liquor licenses once a year. And if you missed that date, you had to either get a temporary or wait a year before you could get your liquor license. So if it was January, or I think it was December, so if your business opened in January, then you missed the date. Then they moved to twice a year. But if you miss any of those days, you have to wait 6 months or do some temporaries. That was very annoying and kind of not very cost effective. What I would like to see, and it might be in here, I was looking for it, I didn't really find it, was where liquor licenses, and I think the board should be able to do that. Like a driver's license, you can get it the same any day of the year. Any day. Mr. Speaker, that is significant progress for the running of a business. That you don't have to wait until this particular date, this particular time. If you open your business in June, in May, you have to wait a month to get a license. Now you should be able to get a license. Whenever you open your business, bam, the license is there. Mr. Speaker, that's real progress. As we try to modernize and make the whole government services more efficient, it's a significant role in that part. Mr. Speaker, also we have to make sure that when you're constituting these boards, that the sister islands aren't ever forgotten. But again, we'll address that more deeply in committee stage. Because a lot of businesses that sell alcohol are also on the sister islands. And not just the main three, but we have several sister islands, Scrub Island, Norman Island, that are Nick Island, Mosquito Island, that sell alcohol. And I say it has been a real challenge in the past, synchronizing all these agencies individually to get a liquor license. Now, one stop. That is serious progress, Mr. Speaker. And I commend the Premier and his team, because I know it's been a long time coming. I've been around this about 10 years, and I can recall this conversation. Time to modernize this process. Time to make it more efficient. Time to cut down on the time to, and all this talk all the time. But finally, we have a government of action who's going to go beyond the talk and, Mr. Speaker, get these things done. I know the businesses out there are very pleased. They must be very pleased. They must have really a sigh of relief when they heard about this tonight. So on their behalf, the businesses who benefit, whose operation wouldn't suffer because they have to wait, because you can't always know when the business is going to be finished and opened. But when you have a fixed date for a liquor license, it can be very disadvantageous to a business. So, Mr. Speaker, with this modernization, with this upgrading, with this new bill here, I'm very happy for the businesses. The businesses, Mr. Speaker, they have been through a lot and are still going through a lot. And we have to find every way possible to make sure we make doing business in the BVI easier. We're in a very competitive environment. And persons are going to go where they can do business easier and efficiently. This, Mr. Speaker, addresses that concern. So, Mr. Speaker, again, I'm really pleased to be connected with this bill, and I'm very happy that the Premier saw it fit to bring it now. He is a man of immense action. Yes, I'll call him the action man. I think if you look at how many things we've brought to the House for the last 16 months, it's almost incomparable. We've been here, I mean, people are complaining they aren't seeing us because we're busy in the House making sure things can function in this country. I mean, we've been here, well, 3 days this week already, and we're back here tomorrow morning again. But we're here for a reason. Passing these laws to make doing business and make life in this country a lot more efficient. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few words there, I thank you very kindly, and I'll take my seat.
I thank the member for the 9th District for his contribution. I recognize the Deputy Premier and Minister for Health and Social Development and Territorial Member, the Honorable Corvin Malone.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for affording me the opportunity to lend a very short debate on this bill. I stand in full support of the bill and will vote yes when it comes to the floor. Mr. Speaker, there are different angles, so clearly the Premier has stated the reason for it, and he has done so comprehensively, and the member for the 3rd indicated just as with other bills that we have worked on and will work on for the next 72 or 96 hours, well, 4 days, we would be tackling a number of bills that were in limbo for years, some 20, some 40. How long has this one been around, Premier, you say? 10 years, a long time. But these are bills that are critical in terms of making sure that our people are protected, making sure that business is enhanced. We have stated before that you either have to stamp them out or properly regulate them so that we can then look at the effects. As Minister of Health, of course, we have to look at the abuse that may well come but is accompanied, but if it is well regulated, then we can then address these issues and address them more quickly, Mr. Speaker. The word that I want to put out in this COVID-19 era, ERA, is that I think that the bars may be one of the biggest violators of the safe distancing protocols that we have. So we must understand, and as we look at the statistics that is coming through from all over the world, as we look at different areas in China and other parts of the United States that had professed to be free of reported cases, they are manifesting themselves again. Some places, Mr. Speaker, have to close down. So we want to make sure that the protocols that have been set for the bars, for the restaurants, for all public places, for homes, we are sitting 6 feet apart and adhering to the protocol even as we speak here tonight. But the fact is that in the bars, and we might say we're limiting the number of persons, but the answer is yes. But it's limiting the number of persons for a specific reason. So whether we feel that this is a way in which you could enhance business, making business easier or more efficient, I think that it is critical for us to adhere under this COVID-19 era, to adhere to the protocols that have been set to keep the entire nation safe. And because I'll make a statement tomorrow, but as we begin to have the persons who have adhered to the return home protocols, where they quarantined for 14 days, where they were tested, some yesterday, some today, some tomorrow, and they will be safely re-entering the territory. We want to make sure that they too understand that there is a reason why they were asked to quarantine, Mr. Speaker. There was a reason why they were asked to look in adhering all of the fine works that we have done for the past 3 months, since I think it's March 19th or something like that. And we had the lockdowns, we had the quarantine, we had the safe distancing, we had the face masks, we had the sanitizing of surfaces and washing of hands and all of that. These must continue. We cannot let our guards down. I think the Premier said that COVID-19 is not playing with us, and we cannot play with it. I think it is critical for us to understand, Mr. Speaker, that as we pass this amendment, or as we pass this new act, as we look in terms of getting this put into the effect, the Liquor License Act of 2019 or 2020, as it will be, that we adhere, Mr. Speaker. We keep safe in all our doings. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I would say thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity. Thank you.
I thank the territorial member for his contributions. Having observed no other member wishing to speak, I therefore call upon the move of the bill. I'm sorry, I'm seeing a member wishing to speak. I recognize the Minister for Education, Culture, Youth Affairs, Fisheries, and Agriculture, and member for the 7th District, Dr. the Honorable Natalia D. Whitley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to debate this very important bill. Mr. Speaker, like the member for the 3rd District said, I want to congratulate the Minister of Finance, the Premier, for being able to place these liquor licenses in the hands of this committee. Of course, we know that the courts for many, many years have spoken about the need to be more efficient. They seem at times overwhelmed with cases, and I know they have been appealing for help for quite a long time. And I believe the Premier has, in his wisdom, done a good job by putting this under the responsibility of this particular committee. And Mr. Speaker, I would just like to make reference to, I'm trying to bring it up in my bill here, the constitution of the board that will be responsible for granting these licenses. And I believe, Mr. Speaker, that you have the type of balance that you require when making these types of decisions, as opposed to putting these type of decisions simply in the hands of a magistrate. You have to balance it off, Mr. Speaker, with persons who are representing different areas which are relevant. So we have here, Mr. Speaker, a legal practitioner on this board. We have a representative of the BVI Tourist Board. We have a representative of the Ministry of Finance nominated by the Minister of Finance. We have a person possessing a social work background or representing the religious community, and you have a senior member of the police force, Mr. Speaker. So there you have a certain level of balance. You have somebody who thinking about it from an economic standpoint, from a social standpoint, from a security standpoint, and from a legal standpoint, Mr. Speaker. You have good balance there. Mr. Speaker, I would ask that persons who are in business and would like to be in business and have liquor sold at their establishment to familiarize themselves with this act, Mr. Speaker, because they have responsibilities. For instance, this act will tell you that you need to have walk-in security cameras. And while it might be an expense on the business owner, Mr. Speaker, I think in these days and times, the BVI is not as it was before. In these days and times, it's quite important, Mr. Speaker, from a security standpoint, to ensure that we have these cameras. You have to have security present, Mr. Speaker, and that's an expense on the business owner. If you have establishment with 50 persons or less, you have to have one security officer. If you have between 50 and 100 persons, you need 2 security officers, and 100 or more, you will need 3 security officers, Mr. Speaker. And I know Honorable Fraser, member for the 3rd District, spoke about the mom and the pop shops. And of course, we know we have quite a number of businesses who they want to sell a few drinks just to help them to get by. And of course, they might feel as though they have these requirements that they have to meet, Mr. Speaker, but we have to be responsible as a society, and we have to ensure that establishments, especially ones selling liquor, has an appropriate amount of security to deal with any unfortunate incidents that may occur. So we have to know the Liquor License Act, Mr. Speaker. Some important aspects of the bill. We have long spoken about liquor being sold to minors, Mr. Speaker. And in this bill, if you just get a minor to buy a drink for yourself as an adult, you can face a $1,000 fine. If you buy yourself, you're an adult, if you buy a drink for a minor, that's another $1,000 fine. And this act places responsibility on the establishment itself, as well as the person who buys the drink. Mr. Speaker, you have responsibility under this act not to allow persons who are drunken to enter into the establishment. And if you serve somebody who's already drunk a drink, that is an offense under this act. So it places a certain level of social responsibility on the establishment to ensure that they're not promoting drunkenness, Mr. Speaker. So I believe that this act was carefully crafted to ensure that we have the type of social protections necessary for these particular establishments, especially considering the fact that they are serving alcohol, Mr. Speaker. I support the bill. I endorse it. I know that when we get in the committee stage, we'll look a little bit more closely at some of the provisions of the act and see where we can value add. But I congratulate the Premier's office, the Ministry of Finance, and the legal practitioners for the good job they have done with this liquor license bill. I know it was here before in the last session, and it's back here again, and I'm glad that we are going to be able to pass this on this day, Mr. Speaker. What a June we have, where we have passed the gaming, now the liquor, and we're going to be following with the marijuana, Mr. Speaker. Quite a medicinal cannabis. So, Mr. Speaker, I support the bill, and I look forward to further discussion in committee stage. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I thank the member for the 7th District for his contribution. At this time, I recognize the Minister for Transportation, Works, Utilities, and member for the 5th District, the Honorable Kai M. Reimer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I too want to lend my voice in support of this bill. As most members have already discussed and spoken of, Mr. Speaker, we know that at the moment, applicants must appear at the magistrate court for the purpose of a hearing to consider the application for a liquor license. And Mr. Speaker, this is a process that it happens only 2 times for the year. And Mr. Speaker, if you miss those times, you have to get a temporary license. And to obtain that license, you have to go through the Deputy Governor's office. And Mr. Speaker, with the presence of this bill, it would eliminate that tedious process of having to go to the magistrate court or even go to the Deputy Governor's office. And Mr. Speaker, like my colleague mentioned, the makeup of the board, you know, it's a fair board where you expect to get, you know, the process as fair as possible. Mr. Speaker, what I see with this bill is the improvement of the processes in regard to the application process. Mr. Speaker, it will eliminate the Deputy Governor's office, the Governor's office from what has become, you know, a tedious process, as I understand it, of obtaining the temporary license. So, Mr. Speaker, this license would now give you the ability to own a license for a whole year, whereas I think it was for 6 months in the first instance. So, Mr. Speaker, I must speak about the progress and acknowledge the work done in terms of getting this bill to this, finally getting it here to this honorable House. And I'm proud to be a part of this government where the Premier, he's, you know, forthcoming and forthright with making sure that these things are actually happening rather than just talking about it, where you would hear, you know, that it was here, but, you know, we miss a sitting and so forth. So it's here. And Mr. Speaker, while some persons may have various thoughts about the consumption of alcohol, you know, it's among us in this community for years. And we must approach this from a matter of business. And the bill, Mr. Speaker, will ensure that the hotels and the restaurants that serve and support the livelihood of the tourism sector, they are able to operate in a seamless manner with a seamless process. But more importantly, Mr. Speaker, the once-a-year application will allow businesses now to focus more on delivering the service, delivering the services of providing this to their clients, and also to ensure that the level of employment is sustained within the territory. And Mr. Speaker, I know I heard the member for the 3rd speak about a bill for, you know, the last forever. Well, Mr. Speaker, you know, I know we continue to modernize, and you know, this bill definitely is for the future. And Mr. Speaker, we know this new act will replace the magistrate with a board that we spoke of earlier. And Mr. Speaker, the applications will be received and reviewed throughout the year. And the board will be mandated to meet as much as possible. So, Mr. Speaker, that within itself says a whole lot about the process and the efficiency of the process where, you know, once you applying for this license, and they give you the time frame when you have to apply and before your license expired, and, you know, it takes you to at least 14 days out, I think up to 3 months before and up to 14 days before it expires, before you can apply for your renewal of your license. So, Mr. Speaker, I think this is progress. I think this is progress, and it's evident from the draft bill that this new proposed bill will see better results, and our clients will be happy with the efficiency. And Mr. Speaker, again, I want to stand in support of this new bill that, is long in coming. And, I'm happy to go through the process and get this new liquor license act approved. I say thank you.
I thank the member for the 5th District for his contributions. The floor remains open. I recognize the Junior Minister for Trade and Economic Development and Territorial Member, the Honorable Shireen D. Flax Charles.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this bill. For so many years, Mr. Speaker, business owners have complained, and I am happy that we are going to be able to make their burden lighter. The bill speaks to being able to apply just once a year for a liquor license, and I think that that is such a major step that many of us might not realize how important that is for persons who have to renew their liquor licenses. It is going to be a more expeditious process. I also lend support to this bill because I believe, Mr. Speaker, that it will assist not only businesses on the sister islands, but also here on the main island of Tortola. I know many persons have complained to me personally that they've had to come to the magistrate court, Mr. Speaker, and they would wait there for hours and hours, and their turn would not come because it was closed off, and they would have to come back. Time is money, and for those persons coming from the sister island, Mr. Speaker, they have to pay 3 and 4 ferry fares just to get their liquor license approved. And of course, persons on Tortola as well who have to take time off from work, from their businesses, to come and stand for hours and hours waiting for their turn to come so that they can have a hearing. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, we are in modern times, and persons who are applying will have to come before the board for a hearing. And I hope that that process too will be just as expeditious. We are in an era where a lot of things are happening virtually, and I think for not only persons on the sister island, but for some persons on Tortola as well, that some of these hearings are able to be held virtually. I think it is important also to mention the section where we speak to the sale of alcohol to minors. This is very, very important to me based on 1 or 2 experiences that I've had. And I think it is very important that we put our inspectors out there after this bill is passed to ensure that minors are not served alcohol. I remember going to a restaurant with my children when 2 of them were underage. And when the drinks came to the table, I had to do a double take, Mr. Speaker, realizing that these drinks with these tiny little stirrers are normally alcoholic drinks. And so said, so done. I had to call the bartender and say, what are you doing? These children are underage. So, Mr. Speaker, I think it is very important with the passage of this bill that that is put in place post-haste, that we have our inspectors on the street. And, Mr. Speaker, I am going to assist in ensuring that we get that in place. It will assist us in cutting down on some of the social ills that we have in our communities. Sometimes I go to places and I see persons with a beer in their hand at 8 o'clock in the morning. And a lot of this, Mr. Speaker, comes from habitually serving alcohol to minors in our communities. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I would say once again that I support this bill, and I look forward to a most expeditious process and a board that will give us the results that we are going to be demanding from this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I thank the territorial member for her contributions. The floor is still open. Haven't observed no one else wishing to make a contribution. I call upon the sponsor of the bill to wrap up.
Mr. Speaker, I think that all that needs to be said has been said. It is quite a number of years that some of these changes have been requested, some of them well over 10 years. But the time is now, and long gone are the days when persons should really be harassing themselves trying to get into the magistrate court to renew a liquor license or to get a liquor license or to pay or whatever the case may be. So it is time to modernize this process, and that's what this bill seeks to do by bringing the Virgin Islands Liquor License Act 2019 and making sure that in the act, in this bill now that will become the act, will be the establishment of the liquor licensing board and many other areas that will come along with the board that will speed up the process for businesses in terms of them seeking to have their liquor license either approved or renewed, or even pay whatever monies they have to pay in terms of fees for the licenses. Mr. Speaker, little by little, they say that a bird builds his nest, and little by little we're improving the economy of the Virgin Islands with making sure that we pass such legislation. Some of them are of some huge nature, some are not so huge in nature, but still a huge impact in the life of the business people of the territory. And once you improve efficiency, Mr. Speaker, and allow for a more effective process, then you also will increase revenues in the territory automatically. So, Mr. Speaker, with that, I thank everyone for the debate. And Mr. Speaker, I move that we go in the committee stage so that we can go clause by clause and come back out with amendments that will strengthen this bill to be one of the best, not only here, but in the Caribbean. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I thank the Premier. Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled Liquor Licenses Act 2019 be now read a second time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill for a second time.
This act may be cited as a Liquor Licenses Act 2019.
Honorable members, pursuant to Standing Order 55-1 of the House of Assembly of the Virgin Islands, the bill now stands committed to a committee of the whole House to be considered clause by clause. This House is now in committee.